Hi, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to our webinar today on decarbonizing the Southern European energy markets through flexible power solutions. Maybe the title sounds a bit long or complex to you, but we're going to demystify it and really go through what these flexible power solutions are and how can they support your renewable projects. I have a great lineup of speakers today, which I will introduce in a moment. But first, I wanted to go through the outline of the webinar today. So today in the agenda, as I said, I'm going to briefly go through the outline. We have a presentation from Miguel Marroquin, from Annette Danielson, and Javier de Volta. And at the end, a brief Q&A and discussion session where you can also jump in and put your questions for the speakers to answer. So that you know, we are Solar Plaza. We are based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, but we are a global company focused on positively impacting the world by accelerating the renewable energy transition with our webinars, conferences, content. So keep an eye out on what we're doing. Might be something interesting for you, such as our Solar Market Parity Spain conference, which we will host in Madrid at the end of this year. Very eager to see people face to face. Or much more recently, we have our Solar Market Parity Italy conference coming up in July. So you know, if you're watching this webinar and you're interested in the Italian market, you can use a 10% discount code and maybe head on to Milan for some drinks and also for some PV knowledge. And before we kickstart the webinar, I also want to make sure that you know that we advise you to put in your questions, to submit your questions throughout the presentation. And please submit them through the Q&A button on the right, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. So please do that. As well as if you have any technical issues, put it through the Q&A box, and we will try to help you out as best as possible. Before we kick on to the presentations, I'd like to give you some insight on our speakers. Starting with Annette Danielson, who's coming in from Wärtsilä, the financial analyst at Wärtsilä, specialized in energy storage development across Europe, so really on theme for today's webinar, and on integrating more renewables in the with the use of flexible assets, working on market and project modeling. But I'm sure she'll introduce herself a bit further, and I am eager to hear her presentation. Next up, we have Javier de Volta, a senior principal from AFNI, leading the advisory service in the power sector, but focused on Spain and LATAM markets, and with over 16 exactly, Javier, I don't know, 8 years of experience in the power sector, and worked as well in the Spanish transmission system operator. So great insights there. And last but not least, we also have Miguel Marroquin, the managing director of Our New Energy, and he has an extensive track record in the structuring and origination of market parity PPAs. And Our New Energy has a great track record as well in their renewable transactions. And I'm sure that he'll let you know more about what he's up to and how that is related to storage in his presentation, which will kickstart right now, actually. Miguel, I will let you take it away with your presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Lorena. First of all, thank you and Solar Plaza for the opportunity and for having the initiative to share knowledge in the market. And yeah, flexibility is an interesting topic, very much in the news lately. So the first slide we wanted to share is this one, which shows a little bit the wide breadth of the technologies, so-called storage technologies, right? Because people tend to think about batteries, lithium batteries, but really there are many technologies that are under development at the moment. So we can identify batteries down there, but flying wheels since a long while, hydrogen now very much, hydrogen electrolyzers, power to X, pump hydro. There's a number of technologies coming fast. To put some numbers, there are over 55 gigawatts of pump hydro in Europe alone, serving the grid, and is set to double in the next 30 years. Well, if we talk about batteries, there are over 25 mega projects in Europe and increasing every day, with announced capacity exceeding 600 gigawatt hours a year of storage capacity, which, by the way, I don't know where we're going to find all the lithium for that, but fine. And hydrogen electrolyzers, that definitely there's enough resource, enough water in the oceans to produce hydrogen. But again, there are very ambitious plans reaching over 40 gigawatt of electrolyzers across Europe by 2050. So all these technologies have in the processes embedded flexibility, and they can provide flexibility. But not to forget that all the demand side of things, they also are flexible. So in the way we consume electricity in Europe, either on households or on the SMEs or on an industrial level, we find a lot of processes which are actually flexible, and we could also assimilate that process flexibility to a battery itself. So not to forget, there are a lot of there's a lot of flexibility dormant in the system and coming online. So the next thing would be to say, well, how this flexibility will be remunerated, right? And the first thing that will come to our minds is our markets, how markets will price such flexibility. And there are basically two main boxes to tick. But I will start with this one, which is the market parity one, the market. How much does the market itself value that kind of flexibility? Depending on the flexibility, whether we're talking about an hourly shift of energy, or a seasonal shift of energy, or a within minute or millisecond shift of energy, it has different values. But for these applications, we're looking at lithium-ion batteries, hybridation, co-location, even hydrogen storage, etc. We look into daily flexibility. And I just did one small exercise, an experiment that anyone can just do their own. It is to imagine or guess, if attending to a number of forecasts that are out there for the Iberian Peninsula about how much wholesale energy prices would be by 2030 on the solar hours, on the night hours. Well, they provide some ratios and etc. So let's imagine how that daily shape will look like in 1 decade from today. So if today we have this orange one you see on the left, the blue one is just one solution, one feasible solution that complies with the parameters that we are given in those forecasts. On the right, we see even other kind of shapes that could also form that view. What I'm trying to say here with this slide is basically this creates an opportunity for flexibility, because if this is meant to happen, definitely you see there's an opportunity to buy and sell energy with a spread of 70 euros, which is enough to pay for a cycle, for a battery at today's costs. But the thing is, would this also be saturated, right? If we have such large gaps, this transfer of wealth from some hours to another hours, would that not start some process where some consumers will start shifting their appetite, etc. Just we try to quantify. We are talking about shifting around 3 billion euros in energy costs alone, without other considerations such as grid access fees and etc. Just energy cost. We are talking about shifting 3 billion euros value a year from some hours to another. So that is a 3 billion euros market for flexibility, for this specific kind of flexibility. So interesting to see how this will develop, and I think Javier will talk a little bit later about what is the role of also interconnections, LCOE, etc. But this to say, if we look at a lot of people come to us and to other people elsewhere, asking what's the case for batteries right now. As I said before, there are two boxes. There's the market box and the grid services box. On the market box, we are quite there. Not just now, but numbers seems to be there soon. The question is whether policymakers would re-regulate the market via auctions, capacity markets, and stuff that will simply diminish the market price signal and reduce the opportunity for batteries to make the money in the wholesale market. Quick additional consideration, learn from experience. We worked on this Estor Lux lithium-ion battery in Belgium. It's a 10 megawatt, 20 megawatt hour battery in Bastogne, reaching COD like about now. And we did some techno-economical analysis of this battery. And what we learned from that experience is that the usual way in which people think about batteries, like one cycle and a half a day or something, that very simple way of modeling doesn't really extract all the value from the battery, from flexibility, because flexibility, because of its characteristics, is basically optionality, and optionality has a lot of extrinsic value. Therefore, one needs to, to cycle the marrow of the battery, or let's say the storage, whatever its form, one needs to understand there are a number of market layers, a number of opportunities, and then to extract value throughout all of them, to extract all the extrinsic value of the flexibility, of the optionality, right? More information in our website if you're interested. And yeah, delivering an optimal dispatching is not an easy thing, but again, it is really something for real IPPs. It is not so simple. So I want to just finish with some broad takeaways. First of all, as for the first slide, batteries are one thing, but batteries are and will be competing with other technologies. So one has to be careful with the cannibalization amongst batteries and amongst other technologies that compete with batteries. Point number two, I've analyzed a couple of hybridization and co-location projects, and in both cases we found out that our client, he was actually double counting the synergies. He was counting the revenues for the battery and also bringing those synergies to with the solar asset as revenue for the asset. So be mindful not to count twice revenues. Okay. Indeed, there are synergies, especially in some markets, such as the UK, but those synergies are limited. Let's make sure that you don't count them twice when you look at these business cases. It is very likely that we will have to run. Javier will talk about that, I'm sure. Auctions, ancillary services, and those auctions and ancillary services will compete against wholesale optimization and flexibility. Both are required. Depending on who you ask, which report you buy, you will see people talk about whether 80% of the revenue will be done in ancillary markets or 70% will be done in wholesale markets. Of course, they're contracting with each other. But the truth is, there will be two pillars, and you will have to move from one to another depending on the opportunities, right? And that's the good thing about flexibility. You have time to decide what you want to do with it. Anyway, indeed, the deployment of ancillary services or the modification of ancillary services to be storage friendly will definitely prove useful, but also aggregation as a business model, as a service, because we are going towards a decentralization of storage, electric vehicles, household batteries, small scale, and they cannot participate to the ancillary services with the TSOs, right? They don't have minimum critical mass. So aggregating them will prove useful. Also, not only because they reach critical mass, but also because they are managed in a more professional manner. And last point, since a lot of people ask what do we feel is this main bottleneck or barrier in any kind of technology that is moving. The thing is, technology and money always moves faster than politics. So what we need, I think, is to empower the market price signal, make sure that the price that we see in the spot markets, they are meaningful, they mean something, and for that reason, or any kind of capacity auctions or capacity payments or parallel markets, they disappear to this view, no? So anyway, there's nothing we can do about it. So we will have to live with both worlds and simply optimize the best we can. So this is my very brief introduction, and I hand over to you, Lorena. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miguel. Quite interesting perspectives, and I really like what you mentioned about extracting all the intrinsic value of these flexibility solutions. How to go about it, we'll talk about more. And I invite Javier to come turn on his camera. And I would also like to clarify that Miguel indeed gave this brief overview of the storage and facility solutions. Javier will focus more on the Spanish and Portuguese perspective, where Annette will close off with the Italian perspective, just so it's clear for our audience. Javier, I'll let you take it away.
Hello, can you hear fine?
Yes.
Great. So thanks, Lorena. Thanks to Solar Plaza for counting on us. So I'll give a few messages on the Spanish and Portuguese market, where storage is and where storage can be expected to be. So very quickly, I'm just showing here the ambitions of Spain and Portugal regarding renewable energy penetration, the dashed line here over final energy. So Spain going from about 20% up to 42% by 2030. This is again renewables over final energy. Portugal going from about 30% to 47%. And on electricity, you see the huge impact of those targets, with Spain going from about 40% to almost 80% by 2030 in the mainland system, 74 national level, but 77% in the mainland system, and Portugal also rising from over 50% to 80% by 2030. So huge ambition. This translates into basically lots of wind and solar capacity with the NECPs, the National Energy and Climate Plan, setting very ambitious targets for both countries. So lots of wind and especially lots of solar coming in both markets. Now, this will cause I think the well-known issue of curtailments, with some hours where the addition of inflexible generation here in the bottom, plus available wind in green, plus available solar, this will occasionally exceed the demand, including exports, including pump storage or other forms of storage, and including potential electrolysis, if this electrolysis comes connected to the grid, which is one of the regulatory uncertainties we have for the decade. And as you see, the energy that electric vehicles will consume on a daily basis, you see here how many, in red, how much 5 million electric vehicles would consume on average in one day. So this means that even lots of electric vehicles will not absorb all the curtailments and all the surpluses of renewables. They'll take some of those at night or around noon, but they will definitely not be able to absorb all the available surpluses. So how much storage do we need? Or at least how much do we want? Well, in Spain, the situation is right now, there are, according to the government, about 8 gigawatts of storage. I say according to the government because I don't really know how they add up to 8 gigawatts. There are about 6 in pumped hydro, and there is a bit of storage in thermal solar plants, in concentrating solar plants. Only some of them have some storage capacity, and actually it's storage which is not available to consume electricity from the grid, at least not the first generation of CSP plants. From this situation, the government wants to reach 20 gigawatts, or this is the roadmap at least. It's not binding really, but this is the roadmap of increasing storage capacity by 3.5 gigawatts of pumped hydro, 5 gigawatts in new CSP plants, which would be able to consume electricity from the grid on top of storing available sun directly from the solar field. Then 2.5 gigawatts of either batteries or other generic storage of daily cycle. It could be compressed air, it could be any other technology with a few hours of storage capacity. And then about 1 gigawatt of batteries behind the meter. Okay, this is the target for Spain. Now, the government has established or has developed technical and legal regulations during 2020 and 2021. So I think technical and legal aspects are pretty much solved. it is possible, or it will be possible very soon, to couple wind and solar projects with batteries, or to develop standalone storage projects. And again, there are these indicative non-binding targets which are set in the National Energy and Climate Plan. I'll talk about regulation in a minute, because this being in a roadmap doesn't mean we have all the incentives and all the conditions to actually achieve those targets. Now, Portugal does not have quantified numbers. Actually, in their NECP, there are some numbers for pumped storage hydro, increasing from the current 2.7 gigawatts up to 3.6. This is actually a known figure because the TAMEGA project, which is finalizing construction, is expected to be operational next year. So by 2022, we will have, or Portugal will have those 3.6 gigawatts. Potentially, the government says there could be a bit more. And then the NECP states in a quite generic, with quite generic words, they say, we want to promote storage in battery systems or in hydrogen technologies, but no quantification. And actually, Portugal, in our projections of system development, we actually find that Portugal, because there's a lot of hydro already and quite some pumped storage in relative terms, actually Portugal does not seem to need lots of storage to enable the high renewable energy integration. So to achieve their 80%, basically Portugal can do it without much storage. This is not so much the case for Spain, given Spain is more isolated, and in relative terms, Spain has a bit less hydro. So Spain actually does need a lot of storage. Portugal is pretty much on track without much effort on storage. Obviously, the more storage comes, the better for lots of things. Reduce curtailments, increase capture prices for wind and solar, do price arbitrage for industry or for consumers. I'm just saying there is not such a high need as in Spain, where otherwise lots and lots of curtailments would happen. Now, just a few messages here on storage and whether it will ever make sense to develop merchant storage projects. First, the scenario in the next few years matters a lot. So will we be in a scenario which looks very much like the political target, or will we be in a scenario which looks a bit different? The starting point, the revenues you can make from price arbitrage are very different. So be sure you understand the scenario that you consider when planning or when projecting revenues. Second message I want to show here. So this graph, by the way, what you see in the x-axis is how revenues from price arbitrage in euros per megawatt and per year reduce as more storage comes in the system. So basically, I'm showing the cannibalization of storage as more storage develops. Obviously, the more storage there is in a system, the higher the off-peak prices and the lower the peak prices. So the more storage we have, the lower the spread and the lower the revenues. I'm showing here that, for example, from starting point, whatever it is in a scenario, by adding about 5 gigawatts in the Iberian market, revenues from price arbitrage already reduced to half. So there is not only the risk of doing numbers and those numbers being cannibalized by new storage coming. There's also the risk coming from the distributed side. And if I make very simple numbers, in Spain, for example, there are almost 20 million households, of which 6 million are detached houses where distributed PV with storage could come potentially. And take, for example, 1 million households out of 6 detached houses times 5 kilowatt batteries, which are getting cheaper and could potentially come to the market massively in the next 2 or 3 years, or at least start arriving. We would have 5 gigawatts of distributed storage in just 1 million houses. So 1 million houses can have the same effect as 2 interconnections between Spain and France, cannibalizing revenues from storage substantially. So just be sure you understand cannibalization risks for storage. Last couple of slides, there are very substantial additional revenues to be made in ancillary services. It's important to project those with hourly models. It's really not a straightforward calculation because you never know ex ante in an hour how much money you can make in ancillary services in the next hours. But we've been doing or developing what we think are fancy and useful methodologies to project those. They are substantial. Still, as of today, we don't see the numbers adding up for merchant storage, especially if we consider the risks of cannibalization of storage revenues in the future. However, we expect additional revenues coming either from technology-specific auctions or from res auctions, renewable auctions. In Spain, actually, we don't think that the Spanish renewable auctions will really work. In Portugal, they have, because there's a completely different regulation. There can be other mechanisms coming. For example, the capacity market, which is under development in Spain, is definitely going to attract some storage. We don't think this will be the solution to attract all the storage we need, just because the capacity needs do not really match with the storage needs. So the capacity market will say we need this much, but actually the roadmap for storage in Spain demands a lot more than what we think the capacity market will attract. So it's important to build a view on all those revenue streams, and I can comment in the Q&A when we think they'll come and what form they could take. This is, I'll skip this one, just showing that capacity requirements in the Iberian system do not really match the storage needs. This is because the Iberian system today is very oversized, and in the next few years we will need little capacity for backup purposes. This is here just showing we've been giving quite some thought to the regulatory possibilities of how to attract storage. The government has gone for what we call here option 2, developing capacity markets with constraints on this capacity coming from storage. They actually tested already in Spain the renewables plus storage solution, which didn't really work in the renewable energy auctions with a market coefficient of 25%, a market exposure coefficient as they call it. So Portugal has done option 1. It has worked, to our surprise, by the way. In Spain it hasn't because of the design. The government is going for option 2. Actually, we think the way forward is actually what we call here option 3.1. So market operation with a premium, which would be auctioned. And what we propose is a CBA mechanism comparing the social welfare of different projects and awarding based on the best value or the highest value of benefits for the system compared to the cost of this incentive. And I can expand if we have time in the Q&A. Quick messages for Spain: ambitious plans for 2030 to enable the energy transition or the national energy and climate plans. We think that this capacity is unlikely, very unlikely to be deployed from the head price arbitrage or the CSP auctions alone. By the way, the government is not developing enough auctions for CSP to enable the NECP. So we have a big question mark really on what the government is thinking about the CSP. Substantial revenues from ancillary services, but you need to understand cannibalization risks. As we see it, merchant investments in storage is unlikely to be successful. Monitor the availability of European and Spanish incentives, because there's going to be a lot of available money for grants, which completely change the numbers. So know you're missing money and be ready to request grants to European and Spanish funds. Strong incentive, by the way, to distributed storage has appeared in Spain in June with a new hourly grid charges with a strong discrimination, strong hourly discrimination. So numbers are very close from adding up on the distributed side. And well, this missing regulatory incentive, as we see it, we propose developing a specific mechanism that the government hasn't spoken about. So this is only AFRY's proposal, which again I can also expand in a Q&A or in future conversations. Portugal is on track for their NECP without much additional storage. However, there have been some projects awarded in the renewable auctions with batteries. We think some more may come in the future. And also same potential for distributed storage combined with distributed PV systems. This is potentially a big source of storage in residential or small businesses that we can expect in the next few years. Sorry, Lorena, I've gone a few minutes over time, but we should still have time for questions.
Indeed, just a few. And indeed, a few questions have already started coming in after yours and Miguel's presentation, but we'll get to them after Annette. So thank you, Javier, and we'll see you soon. Annette, you should have now controls of the screen, and I'll let you take it away with your presentation.
Thank you so much, and thanks for my fellow speakers. Really interesting topics and thoughts already brought up. As said in the beginning, I'm here today representing Wärtsilä, and alongside our flexible engines portfolio, we are one of the largest energy storage companies as well. So we have about 1.5 gigawatts of grid-scale energy storage in operation, deployed or contracted. And as you can see here on the slide, we are a truly global company or have a global reach. Our largest markets for storage at the moment are the US, the UK, and Australasia. But here with some of the highlighted projects, you can see that we have projects elsewhere as well. As a energy storage and optimization company, we are, of course, really interested and closely following the progress that countries are making on their decarbonization path. We also have supported some countries through system modeling, of course, providing our flexible solutions to reach those as well. And I'll now be sharing a few words on Italy as told in the beginning. So here's presented some of the targets that Italy has for 2030. So 55% renewables in electricity consumption, a 60% reduction in emissions when compared to 1990. 6 gigawatts of added storage capacity. That's both your electrochemical and hydro, as per the government's plans. You can see that kind of shadowed area on top of that. An additional 4 gigawatts of distributed storage. But I think it's always good to kind of separate those from each other. As said, they will definitely be kind of in a sort of competition with each other, but what comes to the size and the way that those work, they're kind of very different storage types in that sense. And then you have your 51 gigawatts approximately of cumulative solar capacity for 2030. Integrating renewables into electricity production is fairly straightforward in the sense that we know the technologies, we have them, we know how they work. And Italy is already doing quite well on that, just kind of on an absolute level, but also in relation to their target. Actually, already twice this year and once last year, Italy hit over 60% of renewables as a share of electricity generation. So kind of showing that target can be quite easily met, I think. As the graph shows, however, for the other targets, Italy is kind of less than halfway there. I think, and this is kind of similar to what I think Javier was already saying, the problem is a bit that often there is a clear vision of where we want to get to, but less clarity on how we get there. And of course, when that clarity on how to get there is missing, it's more difficult to then take those steps on reaching those targets. So as I said, reaching that renewable target and going beyond shouldn't be too difficult. It's also really important for the emission reduction target. The easiest way for many sectors to decarbonize is through electrification. And that's why it is so important to meet that renewables and electricity generation target, as well as building out your solar capacity, your wind capacity, also any other renewable forms of electricity production, of course, so that you can not just meet that electricity demand that is there now, that is being replaced with renewables, but also the demand that is coming. Javier gave some nice numbers on that electric vehicle consumption, for instance. Currently, I'd say one of the biggest issues is for kind of building out that renewable capacity in Italy, as well as I'm sure elsewhere, is maybe local opposition, because that can then hinder your permitting processes and kind of stretch out your timelines. I think this was quite visible in the latest Italian renewables auction, where only about 5% of the capacity available for contracts actually got it, or kind of got through. So obviously not the results that people were kind of hoping for. And then we have that storage target. As I said, it's about 6 gigawatts in the government's plan, divided between electrochemical and hydro. And here, one of the biggest hurdles is, as already kind of hinted by Miguel, as well, is the lack of those market opportunities. We all know what those energy storage assets can do, and why they are needed on that system level, but that doesn't automatically translate into actual project feasibility. So as has been said already, having those proper price signals, obviously when we are going forward, we will probably be seeing more of that price volatility. We had that nice graph from Miguel early on. But really having those market signals that storage can then benefit from, as well as allowing revenue stacking, allowing storage to participate in all ancillary services. We have to understand that storage is entering a market that was built for very different types of assets. It was built for big fossil fuel plants, talking about hundreds of megawatts, gigawatts. So ensuring that the regulation and grid code and so forth are kind of technology neutral will be very important. In the interest of time, I won't spend too much time on this graph. I just wanted to highlight the fact that we've already kind of discussed about how there's different sorts of flexibility, different sorts of storage, different industries, different sectors, but it's also kind of important, in my opinion, to really think about just a single day and how decarbonizing and how entering or having storage enter a market, it will really also be functioning differently in the beginning. So it will be easier to decarbonize that middle of the day. Kind of here we have this optimal case we have created for Italy based on actual data of the country, but it's a hypothetical case. So firstly, decarbonize that kind of middle of the day part. That's through decarbonizing your ancillary services and enabling better renewable integration through capacity firming, for instance. So the way you can lower your carbon intensity of electricity generation, basically, that's what you're trying to do. And here, the technology we have readily available today will work well. We can see this in UK, we can see this in Australia, we can see this in US markets. 1 hour, 2 hour batteries can really work here well. Then you have these morning peaks and evening peaks where you start talking more about actually energy shifting, where you might want to have longer duration batteries. Then we of course have kind of third part I've highlighted there, your night, and of course fourth part, which is not visible in this graph, which would be seasonal storage. And here we do need to start thinking about, like Miguel said, what do we mean when we say storage? that doesn't need to be a battery. It can be a long-duration battery, but it can also be your green fuels, your hydrogen, or any other way of storing that electricity. But we do need to keep in mind that the way that these markets are now set up, and kind of the expanding role of storage that will come, is just to keep that in mind when we talk about storage and storage markets, and let's not forget about that kind of the different tasks during just a single day. To wrap up, I'd very briefly like to present one of my favorite case studies of a project from our portfolio. It's the island of Graciosa, located in the Portuguese Azores. So the island is a hybrid facility combining solar, wind, batteries, as well as some engines. The whole microgrid is operated by our GEMS energy management software, which ensures that the system is always obviously creating or generating enough of electricity to meet the demand at any given moment, but also doing that in an optimal way. So ensuring system stability while at the same time maximizing your renewables generation and only using thermal assets when needed. And this is done through taking in weather forecasts and then using artificial intelligence and machine learning to create those renewable generation forecasts and dispatching all of these assets in an optimal way. After introducing storage to the island has managed to get to about 60% renewables on average, frequently hitting 100% as well, as can be seen in 2020. That was 128 days. For reference, this number was about 20 to 40%. So there's been a clear increase there. They also save about 17,000 liters of diesel each month. So that has kind of brought bit cost reductions reflected in the levelized cost of electricity. It's been reduced by about 20% on the island, as well as, of course, reducing their reliance on imported fuel. This case is really relevant for a discussion today, not just because this is a Portuguese island or because Portugal, Spain, and Italy all have islands that are, some are obviously very interconnected to mainland or other areas. Some are only partially, some are not at all. But also because this is exactly what we believe at Wärtsilä will happen and should happen on mainland in larger scale as well. So having storage to enable that, what is now often called renewable baseload, and only using your thermal assets when absolutely necessary. Those assets might be now running on fossil fuels, but down the line, we would obviously want to see green fuels there as well to fully decarbonize the electricity system. I think the case of Graciosa also nicely highlights the benefits of having smart software that manages the whole system, kind of both in an economically as well as technically optimal way. While in a grid-connected project, you're obviously not going to be in charge of the whole system. That kind of optimization through software is just as applicable there, whether it's a single project or maybe a portfolio of assets. Especially when we're talking about all of these changes in the market, whether that's kind of your regulatory changes, new products coming to the market, different competitive situation, having those new price patterns throughout the day, different kind of fluctuation patterns for prices, having software that is able to adapt to that in an instant will ensure that your assets remain profitable and kind of relevant to the market. That was all I wanted to say today from my side. I'm really looking forward to the questions as well as the discussion with Javier and Miguel. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Annette. And I invite Javier and Miguel to come back on screen. It was a great overview, not just of storage, but then really in depth on this market. So that was very beneficial. And we did indeed receive some questions from the audience, but before we get to those, I want to kickstart with a question to the audience, with a poll question to them. Really, the question being what they expect to be, when will renewable generation plus storage be the status quo in Southern Europe? And we've seen some great models and some graphs with some expectations from the speakers. But I really would like to know from the audience themselves, from previous knowledge or from what they've heard today or their own experience in the renewable markets, when would they expect renewable generation for storage to be the status quo, in particular in Southern Europe? Would this be in less than 5 years, between 5 and 10, more than 10, or never? Which would be a very pessimistic view, but could be possible. I'll let them vote a little bit more, but perhaps I'll direct first this question to you, Miguel. And maybe you've already answered a bit throughout your presentation, but how do you tackle this question? Miguel?
Yes. Hey, Lorena, sorry. No, what I can, if I have to comment on this, I think it's like that we're talking about the status quo, and that's a difficult thing, right? What I can share is that we are already investing in a small PV plus storage solution in Spain. As I said in my presentation, I think once you develop some skills on using markets to your advantage, numbers start to add up. I agree also with what Javier said. That's the financial investment case is still not there. But the status quo for market worldwide, more than 10 years. My guess.
All right, then let's see what the audience says. So indeed, the majority is between 5 and 10. We have a 3% that did say never, but I guess this is kind of in line with the discussions we've been having. Correct?
Very much.
Yeah.
Correct.
And instead, to move forward, I would also actually like to bring up a question from the audience that was quite interesting, pertaining, Javier, it was during your presentation. And the question is, looking at your supply versus demand forecast, it looks like you expect massive curtailment and several power plants, particularly solar, will be shut down most of the time. Can you comment on this?
Yes. So the fact that you see solar on top actually doesn't mean that solar is the one curtailed. These curtailments, most of the curtailments we expect, which indeed will be substantial, they will be based on competitive bids. Typically wind, because wind has some moving parts. Wind typically bids 1 or 2 euros above solar. So actually, whenever there is a surplus of wind and solar, it's actually wind curtailed, not PV. Anyway, what gets curtailed does not really matter. When there is a curtailment at national level, meaning there's more renewable than the system can absorb, including storage and exports, power prices are going to collapse. They already have. We've already seen in Iberia even 48 hours straight with prices around or below 1 euro per megawatt hour, effectively zero, or gross margin close to zero. So whether you are curtailed or not in those situations, it doesn't really matter. If you're curtailed, you see no money. If you're not curtailed, you also see no money because power prices are depressed anyway. So what matters really is understanding what we call the capture price per unit of resource, and we do provide projections for this resource weighted capture price. So what you care is how much money is my plant making. This is if your revenues depend on market prices and you don't have CFDs. If you do have a CFD and you are going to get external revenues, then you want to produce no matter what. You will bid as low as regulation allows. In the case of the Spanish regulation, they allow down to zero, actually 0.01, because at zero, you'd already not see the CFD. So those generators will be 0.01 and get the CFD. However, in the long run, we also expect situations where there is more wind and solar under the new support scheme than national demand, which means that those do care about curtailments. So you will be your 0.01 and not get dispatched by the market operator. So it's important to understand both. We can provide some figures on what levels we see. It's in the few percentage points and rising, because as you saw, the magnitudes we want to develop, they make it unavoidable to have some increase in curtailments.
Indeed, curtailment looks like a big topic and a big driver perhaps for storage. But I want to turn the question to Annette, actually. Annette, if I were to ask you, what are the key triggers that would kickstart the broader implementation of storage in these markets, in Italy in particular? What do you see those? What would those key triggers be? I know we've talked a lot about prices. Would that be the same reason for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for many of these new technologies, I mean, so when we talk about storage as batteries or storage as hydrogen, it's a lot about just clarity, whether that's your prices, whether that's your regulatory environment, whether that's how you're treated in the system. Definitely kind of clarity helps to kickstart. I think that the kind of green recovery funding is probably gonna kickstart the development in some countries for sure. I think that there will be opportunities in the Southern European countries there as well. And I'm really interested in seeing how the fast reserve auction that Italy just had, how that will impact the storage market, because I think that has been a great way of kind of luring in investment. It was quite competitive for many reasons. I think one of them was that it was a way of entering the market to kind of test how a battery would then function in the market. And I expect that we would see those assets providing a lot of other services as well as that fast reserve and taking up other tasks. But I think that's going to be really interesting to see whether that will kind of serve as an example for maybe further investment, and even without that fast reserve contract.
And that's a great leadway into the theme of auctions that benefit the storage implementation. I don't know if you'd like to expand on that, Annette, and maybe then Miguel.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely can be benefits, especially if it's in this sort of kind of a competitive way, where it will provide some sort of kind of revenue certainty and make that entrance easier. But I do also really agree with, I think, what Miguel was saying before, that regulation usually comes a bit after. We're kind of a bit behind of technology and investment trends and so on. So I think that it's also a really tricky balance to then not also constrain the opportunities too much and kind of end up in a situation that is less than optimal.
Miguel, would you like to then feedback on that on the auction side?
Yeah, I fully share Annette's view. We also looked at the Italian auction. I think it was really interesting in results. Actually, we are working on some of the winners of that auction. I just repeat what I said before. I want to perhaps link to one very interesting slide from Javier, who showed these different options. How could we make storage work? Should we just enable market pricing, and should we go subsidies, full throttle, or something in between, right? And the thing is, no, maybe as financial investors, we like a certainty, as I was saying. So we want capacity payments 5 years out, like it used to be in the UK at the time. But that's not transparent. That's not even fair, I would say, right? So I think we can do better. If we can push the lines like Annette showed in her example in Portugal, we can do better. We can make things make sense, work, and I hope we can go for the merchant solution, as Javier showed above. But he had as a drawback that is slow. Just a comment there. We've seen in Spain in 2016 we have not even 1 gigawatt of request for connection for PV. 3 years later, we had 90 gigawatts. So I think money goes very fast if we show the numbers work, right? So I hope that as an industry, we can change things.
Can I just say one actually advice to the government? We've already said this before, actually, directly to the government. Storage incentives are fine. They just need to be designed in a good way. And this is basically a payment in euros per megawatt. Storage cannot be given an incentive like renewables in euros per megawatt hour. And therefore, the renewable energy auctions in Spain, they will never work to attract storage. That cannot work. In Portugal, the incentive in the auctions is in a euro per megawatt form. In Spain, it's euro per megawatt hours. It will not work. So please, government, if you design auctions, just think about them well. First attempt did not work. The capacity market can, because this will be a euro per megawatt payment. We just think it's insufficient, but at least the design is fine.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, I think this brings back a question that Miguel asked during his presentation: was how could the market or the government price such flexibility? And I suppose they ideally have those schemes to make it the most beneficial way possible. I'd like to then go over another question from the audience before we continue our discussion. And this question came up in the very beginning, so I'm not sure if we've actually expanded on it. But the question is, why are we only talking about lithium-ion batteries, when there are other battery technologies with more advantages for stationary usage? I could direct it to anyone, but Miguel, this came up during your presentation, actually.
Yeah, I think it was my slide number 1. I'm an engineer, so since 10 years I've been obsessed with demand response. I work in a project in Leverkusen, in the largest chlorine electrolyzer in the world, to use flexibility from industrial processes. So that's feasible. It is feasible. It's just a matter of communication, understanding, of being a little bit bold. So I totally agree with the comment. We have lithium-ion batteries, but we also have power to X coming. We have flex batteries. We have hydrogen coming. And it's all going to compete, to cannibalize, as Javier said. So, yeah, get ready for the ride.
Yes, and
yeah, maybe just, yeah, no, just to comment, because I mean, I definitely agree. I think that they will compete, but I also think that they will complement each other. You will probably be using I mean, there will be overlap, but you know, let's take demand response, electrochemical batteries, and hydrogen. There will be overlap, but they will also be used in different ways in different situations. So in that sense, I also think that it's not just about competition, but also complementing each other. And what comes to kind of the point of why we talk all about lithium-ion batteries, I think it's an excellent point, but it's also because that is the dominant technology at the moment. Let's push other technologies there. That's great, but that is the dominant and most readily available and proven technology at this moment. So I think that's why we kind of always keep coming back to it at this stage.
I see. Well, I'd like to kick off another poll to the audience, actually, and the question I'll answer to all of you as well. Is a question about what do they believe is the main bottleneck to the deployment of storage solutions on a large scale? And please vote. I'd love to hear what the audience also has to say. Do you believe that the main bottleneck to the deployment of storage solutions on a large scale is technology integration? Is it bankability costs, the regulatory framework / subsidies, or licensing and permitting processes? So please vote away, and I'll give you a few more moments to do so while I actually direct the question to Javier. How would you vote in this scenario?
Yeah, so for me it's pretty clear. A few years ago, actually until last year, it would have been the last one, licensing and permitting. It was directly not allowed. You'd go and ask the TSO, can I connect here? I'm a battery, and the TSO will say, sorry, there's no regulation for you. I cannot even answer. Now that has been solved, and the question now is the second to last. It's basically the regulatory framework and the incentives to make the numbers add up. Everything else, the technology is there, the money is there, the grid is there, everything is there. It's just the numbers which aren't, and the numbers will be there when the government develops either some paid service or some incentive. Even the hourly discrimination of the grid charges in Spain is a form of incentive. But there needs to be a way for numbers to add up. They don't yet.
Yeah, this is very in line with what the audience was thinking, although they could have been biased with your presentations beforehand. And bankability and costs a very close second, which of course is something to always take into consideration in these scenarios. But we are reaching the final times that we have available. Maybe I did want to talk a little bit about the needs of the system and maybe go back a few steps and just be like, in what ways storage support the system, but perhaps that could be a topic for another time. I would rather ask a final question on, I'll start with you, Annette. If what would be your ideal scenario in, let's say, 5 years from now, or like an ideal project, and how would you implement storage to it? Or is that already a scenario that you can see nowadays?
Yeah, I think in an ideal scenario, we would start building that renewable capacity now, because I don't think that we should be wasting too much time on that. But I mean, and we've said this many times, but the market and the opportunities need to be there. You need to have, you cannot assume that storage can function in the way that it optimally can if you just put a battery into a system designed for thermal. It won't operate, it won't get those opportunities that it could so well respond to. So we usually come back to the regulatory side, but I do really think that is the key here.
Great, and Miguel, then a similar question: what is your ideal scenario, like a final message, or what would you prioritize on the storage conversation?
We're not coordinated, but I agree more with Annette. I agree. The system we are using, we live on, it was not designed, it's not fit, not for storage, but not even for renewables. Right? So in 5 years, what I would like to see is technology developing. Again, we all can ride in electric scooters for almost no cost whatsoever. So I mean, this is a reality. It's there, right? So let's just use it. Technology developing, and markets. Let's just enable it. Let's just enhance the market. Let the market take the lead. Because if we put subsidies again on everything, then we will have coexisting 70 different kinds of assets into one market. That doesn't bring any meaning to it. So regulation and technology.
All right, and Javier, I'll pose the same question to you.
Well, I think I'm not sure I agree in the content. I disagree in the phrasing of what I think works in the next few years. I mean, I do think that there's no alternative to a market where you need to have an hourly dispatch that dispatches the most cost-effective plants in Europe. We need that. I don't see a way or a better market than a marginal one. However, this doesn't mean that if you let the market as it is today work with no additional revenue streams, then some things do not work. You do not reach the decarbonization you want. There start being some problems. So I don't think we need to change it. I think we need to complement it. And the way you complement it is, as I explained in my presentation, if there is a positive cost-benefit analysis, the same way that interconnections are studied, and you check whether the cost is lower than the benefit, exactly the same thing can be done for storage projects. We check the benefit of integrating in renewables. I think we all know the benefits. Well, if those benefits outweigh the cost of the missing money that you need to provide to different storage plants, then put them in competition, do a CBA, rank them, and give them a complement so they can operate in the current market. So do not change the market, complement it. Whenever missing money for technologies that are needed for the system, and storage is definitely one, just like interconnections are, then do it and develop options which work, and contact AFRY if you're not clear on how to make things work. Or at least we're happy to share our proposals for discussion.
Thank you for the final message. I'll bring up the slides actually so that we can close off the panel, but I really like your final message, Javier. We just need to develop options that work. That is sometimes a big ask, but maybe we can get there. And I'd like to thank you all for your participation today, and just quickly, just finding the final slides that I want to touch on. And if you have, well, we've gone through our final messages already, but really just thank you for your participation. There were some great insights and analysis made today, and really these discussions help drive forward decarbonized future through, now we're talking about flexible power solutions such as storage. So really thank you so much, and I invite any listeners to look at our upcoming Italy event if they want to use that discount code, or Spanish event, as well as our own consultancy branch. But really, I want to give the floor to the speakers one last time, and thank you really for the conversation today.
Thank you, Lorena.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're closing it now, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you. Likewise.